Hello and welcome to Camille Flammarion Series 2024. We are delighted that you are here with us watching episode number 9 of the series. And today we have here with us Dr. Sheyne Martin as our guest, and she will be talking to us about the book Lumen by Camille Flammarion. So, Dr. Martin, welcome to the series. It's a pleasure to have you here with us in the studio.
Thank you, Dr. Munir. What a blessing to be with you guys here at Cardiac Radio, at the bus, and the many other places that will watch us either live or on demand.
Yeah, indeed. So I'll briefly introduce Dr. Martin to those who don't know her. So Dr. Martin, she is a healthcare outcomes researcher. She's got a PhD and a master's degree in neuroscience. She conducts clinical research as a surgical service at a large hospital in Richmond, Virginia. She contributes to many translations of Spiritist books into English, and she is a cardiac radio host to the Spiritist magazine Courage book study, and the founder president of the Spiritist Society of Richmond in Richmond, Virginia, United States. So, Dr. Martin, the studio is all yours. I'll be backstage, so just call me if you need anything.
Sounds good. Thank you, Dr. Munir.
Okay, have a nice presentation.
Thank you. We want, dear friends, to welcome you to the book Lumen. First, we want to thank you for being here, interested in this, one of the pioneers of the Spiritist movement, the book Lumen. And of course, I want to thank Elsa for putting us all together once a month to study, and so we can get to know more of the history of our own Spiritist movement. The book Lumen, of course, was written by Camille Flammarion. I want to emphasize that we all should watch the 3-part or maybe a 4-part series by Charles Kemp on the biography of Camille Flammarion, because we need to understand what is and what is not in the context of each and every author that we talk about in their respective works of literature, works of whatever type of art that we can talk about. So I have this copy of the book Lumen that you also can have, that is, I believe, from Duke Library, where I chose this one versus there's a free version of the book as well. We can link in the descriptions or in the comments. The book Lumen was first published as part of a different set of collections in 1782. I chose this version, and I believe it became its own set-aside book in 1886, 1887. I chose this version because the same way when we want to understand where an author is and what the book is about, we want to understand the structure of the books that we're listening to. This first part of the book, and as I'm going to show you, it's all translator's note. So of course this is the more modern English translation of the book that puts Camille Flammarion into context in the comparison between him, his works, and the works of other authors that were also writing about science fiction. So spoiler alert, the book Lumen is considered to be the first work of scientific science fiction novel to describe alien life throughout the universe. And the back of the book, which is very helpful to me, has notes. So it puts the comments and the descriptions of the different worlds and the different concepts of Camille Flammarion into context as well. So it's a all-in-one resource for us to understand. And of course, we want to encourage all of us to read the books. Maybe if you like science fiction, this can be a book that you can share with your friends and family, and even in your Spiritist group as well. So the book structure, just as we study in other parts in the books of Gabriel Delan and Leon Denis, we want to understand how the book is structured so that we can take the most out of the teachings of the author. This book is structured in 5 conversations: first, second, third, fourth, and fifth conversations. And each conversation deals with a different topic. So he titled his first conversation, Resurrection, of the Past. The second, The Reversal of Time. The third, Homo Homunculus. Fourth, Previous Lives. And fifth, Imagination is Bold, Nature is Bolder. So I will be bringing to you selected readings from each of the chapters so we can immerse ourselves in the stories of the book. The book has 2 main characters: Lumen, which is the narrator of the experiences that he's gonna explain to Corinne's, which in my book doesn't show up as Corinne's, but in other versions it does. It just shows up as the character asking the questions. And they are 2 characters who knew each other in this life, and Lumen discarnates and comes back in a series of 5 conversations throughout around 2 years of time. That is the time that passes in the book. So Corinne is asking questions, Lumen is answering the questions. First analogy from this structure to what we see in the spiritual literature in general. Of course, Camille was writing under the inspiration and guidance of his superior spirits. He was also known to be a medium. So, of course, what he's describing to us is not only a science fiction idea, but also perhaps real experiences that he has had, that he was able to learn from the spirits. In the same manner that the books of Allan Kardec, in the 5th conversation, he mentions his meetings with Kardec, having known of Kardec and explaining to Kardec how his teachings were, how his descriptions of the many lives and different planets and life forms in the universe is coherent with the theory of the polarity of existences and the multitude of inhabited worlds. So I'm going to go back and we're going to go somewhat in detail to each one of the conversations. Now, I have no problem saying to you that I do not mean to be reading and discussing a whole book that could be its own book club in the 40 minutes, the 45 minutes that we have together. I want to inspire you to go read the books. We are so bombarded with so many information today, but we need to go back to the source and understand where we were. And for those who love physics, who know way more physics than I care to admit, because I'm a biology, I'm a medical person, but there's a lot of information here based on the physics of the time. Remember, this book is from late 1800. So since then, many more discoveries and beautiful things have been brought to us by physics, and we continue to experience those discoveries, especially as we talk about going out into the universe and exploring different planets, so on and so forth. So shall we dive into each and every conversation? I'm always going to bring us to compare and contrast with our teachings of the Spiritist doctrine, because I want to think about how this book can inspire us to transcend the knowledge that we have, especially if you're not a Spiritist. If you're only concerned with the physical body, the audience is not of an audience of a Spiritist, is the audience of everyone who was in France and in Europe reading books at the time and thinking about the multitude of life forms and lives all throughout the universe. So in the first conversation, Lumen and Corinne are having a conversation that he titles Resurrection of the Past. It's the longest conversation on the book, where Lumen is describing his experiences after the death of his physical body. After the disintegration of his physical body, where we call death colloquially here on the earth. So he's talking about traveling outside of his body, seeing his body, understanding that he is outside of the body, that this current life on the earth is ended, and he's going to travel in space and time. He describes to Corinne's Lumen that he is actually talking and speaking from a capella. Remember, capella is I believe it's a 4-sun star group And he is in one of the planets that belong to a Capella, and he's explaining to Corinne how he can, from Capella, look down and understand, look down metaphorically, right? Because there's no up and down, left, right, and on the universe. But he can, from a Capella, look and find um, himself in space, floating in space, traveling to different places, which we know we can do through dreams, through experiences. And he's meeting other beings in other planets. He also talks about watching his own life on Earth, passing through his eyes. So he's just describing to Corinne what's happening. So the first thing we want to bring attention to here is, he says, did you feel any sensations immediately after death? You're probably already thinking that I'm reading from the Spirit's book, but I'm reading from Lumen. He says, after death, but there is no death. It's not death. What do you call death? The separation of the body from the soul. It is not, strictly speaking, a material process like the chemical separations of elements from a compound. No one is more conscious of these final separations that seems to be cruel. We are born into heavenly life as unconscious as we are born into the earthly life, except that the soul, no longer enveloped by its bodily shell, acquires a consciousness, individualness, and powers far more rapidly. So here he is in details explaining the composition of the bodies as they understood back then, that there is no death. When you and I talk with our friends and family, when we help those through the grieving process, of course we are sad, we cry, but then through these conversations, we are understanding that we can connect with our loved ones. That is just a change in state, it's a transition from one state to the next stage. And he will talk about the body is this association of molecules, molecules being associations of atoms, and how we renew our body incessantly throughout our lifetime. So if we think about it, now speaking as a biologist, the body that you had when you were born is not the body we have today, and it's not the body we're going to have for decades. We're constantly renewing ourselves. So within the first page, I'm only on the first page, we have many concepts we can take. Of course, we can read this strictly as a science fiction novel for those who don't believe in immortality of the soul, life in other planets, who are still believing only in the physical. But then we can think about if Koreans can talk to Lumens, they were friends in this earthly life, then so can we. You now, dear friend, is being inspired to be here by your mentors and guides. So when we have questions, we should ask them. Even if it's inquiring about the universe, when a scientist, like Dr. Munir, is in a lab doing his experiments, he is thinking about problems, and his mentors can come here and help, and they do, whether we are conscious or unconscious. So I can do that in my work. You can do that in your life. We can constantly be asking those questions. Is there more? That's one of the features. We're going to see a summary of the book. It is inspiring people to think about us. Think about how many books these days we have about this, how many movies we have of people leaving their bodies, traveling into space, Star Wars, right? We have this ability to travel through space and build spaceships and go and survive. And even now we have astronauts up in the Earth talking to Earth and living in an international station. We're sending probes to different planets, yet with the mindset that we're going to find life forms just as the Earth. And throughout this book, Camille Flammarion is going to describe to us how beautiful this process is of thinking of something, being magnetically attracted to that something, thinking about a star, seeing himself, thinking about Camille Flammarion was an astronomer, so he names many constellations, many galaxies. He thinks of them, and then he finds out that he lived a past life in this place, and he's building up this knowledge of constant renewal, interchange between the physical and in the spiritual realms, different physical compositions of the planet, so on and so forth. And he's going to talk about in a different part, which I found very interesting for us to review, talking about the human being having these three elements that follow it throughout the universe. This concept of the presence of humanity everywhere. In the books of Kardec, in the books of André Luiz and Emmanuel, we see Emmanuel on the way to the light describes the history of the earth and the beings that came from a capella, the same place as Lumen is currently located, speaking to Koreans. Interestingly enough, they only speak throughout the night. The moment the sunshine arrives on earth for the incarnate being, he has to live and then he comes back another time. Just as today, many mediums have this interaction between the two realms. He talks about three elements of the human being reproduced in the universe at large: the atoms that comprise the material world, the physical forces that regulate the world, continually transforming it, God, the eternal and infinite spirit, intellectual organizer of the mathematical laws, the physical laws that we obey, this unknown being that reside in whom reside the supreme principles of truth, beauty, and goodness. So here we see a spiritist, spiritualist being, astronomer, physicist, using his knowledge to create something that will inspire others to see themselves. Could I travel throughout space? How might life looks elsewhere? Planting the seed as Jesus did, right? We plant the seed of immortality, of more than the soul, so we can continue. And then on our second conversation, Lumens will describe reversal of time. She will experience watching whole Earth's history backwards, meaning he's doing somewhat of a life review. In the first conversation, he saw his own life. He describes seeing himself as a younger person, younger and younger, seeing himself as a child. Here, he's going to describe throughout the conversation how he sees, he thinks of something, he's attracted to a thought, to a place on the earth, and then he goes and witnesses the aspect and the events of that place. So he's in France. His last life of Lumen was in France. So he experiences Napoleon and the wars, and he goes back to describing history of France. And then he goes to Rome. He talks about Nero and the fire that we can all read about in the book Paul and Stephen. Then he goes back to Jerusalem. He can see Jesus, not his face, but he can see Jesus climbing the hill, accompanied by a few women, escorted by the troop of soldiers. And then he's describing that he can watch the crucifixion of Jesus. Interestingly enough, he's not watching any of these events as you and I are seeing each other right now, eye to eye. His perspective is at a bird's eye view. So when Corinne asks of him, how does Jesus look like? How do your parents, grandparents look like? He can't describe it because he says, I can only see the event think about a drone these days, right? We can send a drone and we can see what is happening between time. So he describes the earthly he describes the perspective from above. Isaiah, he talks about seeing Isaiah prophesizing the building of the pyramids, the beings on the Stone Age, all the way to when the earth didn't have humans or primates, when the earth didn't have animals, when the earth only had the plant kingdom and the bacteria, and all the way until earth disappears. So it's a true reversal of time. And here he's talking about there might be other planets all throughout the universe that look similarly to the earth that we can imagine. He also talks about how we can't think of this, but just based on sheer numbers, we can imagine that we are not alone. We are very arrogant when it comes to science, physical science, when we see very famous scientists who are spreading scientific knowledge, which is a great thing because we want to have people interested in science, in robotics, and technology, and AI, in medical fields, so we can progress as humanity. But we also want to understand when we go through this travel in time, watching the Earth backwards to the beginning. There is actually a Hollywood movie that talks about Brad Pitt character aging backwards, right, or becoming younger. So to see how something that someone writes in 1800s, late 1800s, with his knowledge of physics of the time, with his background in astrology, today we have the seeds of it with better, more interesting 3D, 4D ways of watching right from the comfort of our own homes. So we want to acknowledge and thank Camille Flammarion for bringing us these aspects of making us think differently. Maybe in this lifetime, someone doesn't believe in reincarnation. They're still children of God. Jesus is still taking, but they read something like this. They watch Doctor Who. They watch the movies, which there's a lot of things physically wrong with, many depictions of life on the universe, but from the Earth's point of view, from our point of view of logic. And then it plants the seeds to allow us to see different perspectives. How would my body look like? And then thinking about watching the whole history of Earth, I'm going to ask you, as you read through this book, wouldn't you want to go back to experience the Master? If you could watch him teaching the apostles, teaching the disciples, if you're like physics, biology, math, science, you like building of the pyramids. We all argue how it was done. He was able to watch it backwards. Interestingly enough, it describes some of the wars where, the people are the bodies are on the ground, unfortunately deceased, right? Because they were attacking one another and killing each other. And then they can see that body revived and walk backwards and mount the horse and go back to the beginning where there was a time of peace where the wars were in there. So it makes us imagine ourselves in different situations. And every time you read a book, says the only in the book Afterlife, chapter 49, every time you read a book, you connect directly with the spirit that wrote the book. So you can pray before you read Lumen and ask Camille Flammarion to send you his thoughts for wherever he is in the universe, to inspire you to better understand and better comprehend what the vastness and infiniteness of the universe and its multitude of forms. The third conversation is named Homo homunculus, which is a very similar name that we give to this brain structure that describes which parts of your brain control different parts of your physical body in your motor cortex, meaning, there's a region in my brain that roughly describes my hand. And then if that region is severed through injury or trauma, and then the hand stops moving. We kind of understand that through the sense of stroke. In this third conversation, the main topics are human senses, comparison between Earth and other planets, and the human body composition and capacity depending on the planet we live in. Beautifully enough, he will talk about senses. I'm going to read from my book, is page 63. He says, not only do your senses not perceive physical movements, certain physical movements, such as solar and terrestrial electricity, whose currents interact in the atmosphere, the magnetism of minerals and plants, the affinities of organisms, and so on, which are invisible to us. Some of the aspects of nature, now it's me, are invisible to us. Our eyeballs don't see ultraviolet light. But in the next chapter, he's going to describe a planet where humans can see UV light. And they don't have eyes, they see with the eyes of their different senses. But then you can imagine some bees and insects see UV. So what they see of planet Earth is a completely different experience than what we see. So how much we perceive depends on where on the universe we are. So when he talks about comparing humankind here on the earth as elsewhere in the universe, he's bringing to us the concept of evolution of the soul and of the physical body. In the Spirit's book, question 100, all the way to 115, 116, if I'm not mistaken, Kardec brings to us through the superior spirits, right? The teachings of the superior spirits, this scale of evolution. In order to get to be a superior spirit, we have to have these experiences in different planets, in different lifetimes on the earth, so that I can develop different capacities. And he says, the truth is so profound that it might be well hypothesized that beings exist upon the earth essentially different from you, possessing neither eyes nor ears or any of your other senses, but endowed with other senses, incapable of perceiving that which you cannot perceive, and who are living in the world as just as yourself, know that each you cannot know and form an idea of nature completely at a variance over our own. So let's think about this. When I am developing a spaceship, which I'm not, but let's hypothesize that I'm there in NASA thinking about a spaceship. And then I send a spaceship to Venus, which is one of the lifetimes of Lumen, or Jupiter, or Pluto, or somewhere in the universe. I'm looking for life just as on Earth. Then what we're thinking about? We're thinking about finding things that look like us. The beauty of even just considering the life that we have on this planet, the capacity that we have. Some of us are tall, some of us like me are short, some can speak language A, some speak language B, some of us are lucky speak A and B and more. So if I am reborn on the earth in a different culture, in a different climate, I gain experiences that are different than today when I am here in the United States. If I am living in the Arctic Circle, I have to adapt to the conditions of the Arctic Circle. If I am reborn in a place in the close to the equator, the lives that those folks live, even though they have the same human body that I do, are different than those, even from the equator, think Amazon or Sahara Desert in Africa. So even within the planet, we have different experiences. And the beauty of considering different beings and different planets also allows us to say, yes, the multitude of inhabited planets. Every experience that we get to live on this planet and others brings to us this wealth of knowledge, the wealth of wisdom, and the wealth of spiritual abilities. Because we are here more than to just evolve materially. We're here to really acquire spiritual habits that we yet, unfortunately, do not have. The book is Lumen because he's going to use throughout the book the knowledge of light traveling through space in order for him to be able from Capella to see what is happening on the earth, encountering beings that are different than him, and he is seeing his own lifetimes in different planets where he has experiences different life forms and human bodies. I'm going to make a parenthesis because I want to bring to you, because we think that some will read this and think he was consuming some substances to increase the power of his imagination. However, in the book, which is not the truth, he was an astronomer. He was also a medium. He was inspired, as all authors are, to inspire the book. When we're writing a book, when we're reading a book, we're inspired to be there. So when we think about the books of André Luiz, there's one book in particular, I believe it's either Messengers or Missionaries of the Light. And I apologize, I don't know the specific book. But those who know the story will know. André Luiz is preparing to come and study and learn from one of the many experiences that he has helping. And then they are brought into the Messenger Center, I believe it's in the Messenger's book. And then they receive a visit from a spirit that is from the higher spheres of Earth. In order for that spirit to be visible and interact with those on no solar, to remember, it's just right above the lower zones of the Earth, hovering Rio de Janeiro, but all big cities have their own no solar. In a sense, they're different spiritual colonies. The beings in no solar have to materialize inside the dome the elements for that being who does not have the human form as we know to materialize, and the upper half of his body materializes. So imagine, dear friend, how many more bodies all throughout the universe can we find? How many different types of humans and the abilities and capacities that we have that are somewhat attenuated on the earth so that we can live and experience the life that we have on earth. Now, for the fourth conversation, describes Lumen's many lifetimes. He talks about being a capella and watching beautifully the beings in the capella praying for us on the earth because they can watch one of the wars that are happening in France, one of the battles, and they feel sorry for us and they pray for us. Now, all the planets on the universe work in cooperation. We know from the way to the light, I'm going to go back to this part here, from Emmanuel, that the spirits met to plan the formation of the earth. We know from the book No Solar that the spirits are praying but isolating somewhat themselves in Jupiter, in Venus, in Saturn to protect themselves from the nefarious effects of the World War II on the earth. The worlds happen in our lifetimes happen in cooperation. And on earth, I'm here to learn to live with the resources of the earth, and my perispiritual body, as we see in the Spirit's book, absorbs the elements of that planet. So there's nothing that cannot be true about the stories. Human composition and capacity depends on the elements of the planet. On Earth, we have our own periodic table of elements. In other planets, they have their own. Therefore, we're going to look and act very differently. Here, he's going to talk about the many lifetimes that he had. So I would like to invite you to think about these lifetimes. Where were our own lifetimes? We may or may not be able to know of them. But he's going to talk about his lifetimes. So he's going to talk about incarnating on Gemini Virginis in 172 years ago. Then he had a life in Andromeda, which is a different galaxy from the Milky Way, right? The closest, if I'm not mistaken, galaxy from the Milky Way, our neighbor. And then he had a life in Venus, our own Venus, 900 years ago. In Cygnus, 1500 years ago. And Theta Orionis, 2500 years ago. The interesting one that I put a asterisk next to it, because I really want to encourage you to go and understand the different explanations, this expansion of our own imagination. What would not just the pointy head, big eye, or green beings that we put on movies, right? Remember, the aliens come, they always kind of look a certain way. If they're not ET and nice, they're coming on a ship, they're coming to attack us. They look a certain way. They're definitely way more and more technologically advanced than we are because they came to us. We didn't go to them, right? But then in Cygnus, he talks about a humankind, which is very interesting to think of it because we know we don't regress, but a humankind that is stationary. So he says in this planet, they're calm, serene. There's no war. There's only one language. There's only one culture. On Earth, we have the diversity and beauty of different cultures. So the same way, different bodies, short, tall, different colors, different compositions. Some are what we call fully able, some come with certain disabilities, and we're all interacting and learning of this beautiful, even nature is very different. Some other planets, they're more uniform. We know from the Spiritist magazines that Jupiter is one of the most advanced on the Earth, and there's no wars. Life lasts for 300, 400 years because the spirits on those planets, reincarnation needs are different from ours. So let's think about this. When he's explaining to the layman, and I say laymen, those who don't know of spiritism, who don't know of spiritualism at the time, who don't think of um, human beings as capable of reincarnation in this planet and others. He's planting that seed to allow us to imagine, what would my life be if I lived elsewhere? What if there's planets just like Earth elsewhere, which there are, we know. Where are we going to go if we don't evolve on the Earth through the planetary transition? We're going to be invited to go to a different planet of trials and expiations elsewhere, so we don't hinder the evolution of the planet here. So, the most beautiful thing to listen to his descriptions of having these beings who don't move, other beings that see, they have eyes that are different. They don't see what we see, they don't see the light spectrum that you and I see with our cones and rods in our retina, but they perceive UV light, they might perceive infrared, and the galaxies and the planets would look very different. The composition, if you could put a, actually, you can actually see this. If you go to the NASA website and you look for the Hubble, now for the James Webb Telescope, the Chandra Telescope, and many others that I will be able to mention here, they have many descriptions where the artists, they take the same image of one galaxy or of a body of a star elsewhere in the universe with the different telescopes, and they superimpose it, and you would see the nothing that we imagine with the infrared, the X-ray, the visual light. When they show us different things, so it's much beautiful to understand and imagine ourselves as traveling through space to experience it, right? And if you do travel through space, please come back, write a beautiful science fiction novel, and spread the good news that life is more than the physical. And the last but not least is the fifth conversation. Imagination is bold, nature is bolder. In this conversation, he's going to go explain to Corinne's Lumen, we explain to Corinne's how the universe is infinite. This is a more modern concept, right? In the beginning, we thought that all we saw in the world, Earth was the center. So here's a picture of the James Webb Telescope from NASA for you to understand that's a little piece of the Earth sky where James Webb is looking, and see how many galaxies you see here. All of these have many suns, many stars, many humanities, many different kingdoms of plants, animals, and minerals that we don't imagine. They're out there in the universe, oblivious probably to our existence, the same way we think they're not there. All of these, if we could blow up, would be billions and billions of stars, just like our Milky Way. And in the same perspective, we never saw our Milky Way, right? There's no probe outside the Milky Way taking pictures of ourselves. What we know is the spiral galaxies around us. So look at this beautiful image here. The universe is infinite and is expanding. God is constantly creating. So he's going to talk here about the moral and intellectual diversity of humankind. Not only physical, as we see each other as physically different, but morally and intellectually diverse. So what I know complements what you know. What you are able to accomplish in society, I can't, and vice versa. Then we fulfill the law of society by interaction, by building relationships, by using our talents to perform the known. So the many scientists that came together to create the James Webb, and the billions of dollars that we paid to send the James Webb into the outer space, protect it from the sun, and it's there taking pictures of same places as Hubble, and there are beautiful NASA galleries that you can download. They put all those pictures in flirk.com. If you go to NASA, just Google NASA James Webb, and they have, Hubble, James Webb, and even within the difference is so much more beautiful, so much more clear. As technology improves, we're going to know more and more and more. And he talks about how the universe being infinite, We have different senses. He says the Saturnian eye sees in a different manner. The universe is infinite. Our terrestrial existence, this is on page 113 for me, is only one phase of the infinite. In an inexhaustible diversity, enriches the marvelous field of the eternal sower. So here he is bringing to a science fiction audience, because usually we're more rational, the knowledge of an eternal sower. It is also in the conversation where he mentions Allan Kardec, meeting of Allan Kardec, and how he was allowed to bring these concepts to us. So sowing the seeds to allow each other to see more, to compare, to look around us and see one another as complementary, not combative, not one against the other. So if you think about, he says, it's very interesting. Well, I recently visited a world belonging to one of the most luminous regions of the Milky Way, where a completely different moral order exists, where the constitution of the government is such that only those distinguished for their virtues are placed at the head of the state. So, in the most luminous places, only the good reigns in the organizations of the planet. Same in Nosolar, just one colony of the Earth. I bring Nosolar because it's the one that people most know. But at the head of the galaxy, there is a superior spirit and others working, right? Remember in the Bible, it's a group of Elohim, group of gods, of spirits who create the earth. At the head of our earth is Jesus, superior spirit. In order to get to his level, we have to have all these experiences. And God is so good. This eternal sower is so beautiful that gives to us many places, infinite number of places. Oh, look at all this, look at this picture. All of these galaxies could be harboring, and it could be our harboring planets that could harbor the life that I need in my step in my evolutionary process. So God is so gracious that not only we have Camille Flammarion bringing these teachings to us in the lanes of traveling the world, but also allowing us to consider other points of view that could be other than our own experience. In summary, friends, we are in 2024. This book was first published separately in 1886, 1887. How many of us could use considering other people's point of view? We're still learning. We need workers like this that brings the Spiritist doctrine into a book, the concept that opens people's eyes to what is different. We have to stop thinking we are the center of the universe, that it's only about us, my way, so on and so forth. The awareness of more than this physical realm, what is available. Remember, Lumen is dead, talking to someone alive on the earth, where in Spiritism we call them the incarnate being, talking a spirit, talking to a soul, which is an incarnate being. That already by itself is a conversation that we can have that allows people to think, well, if they're talking, could I talk to a dead person? You know, and then God brings us these teachings one by one and incorporate the scientific knowledge at the time and concepts from astronomy into his narrative. So it's bringing people to be interested in the topic, to go study, get their studies, be professors like Dr. Menin, teach this back to the people so that we can open our minds to the constant goodness of God that grants us books like this, but not only that, that grants us the ability to be here today together, to just have a little glimpse of this beautiful narrative of Lumen by Camille Flammarion. So I'm going to invite Dr. Monique to join us so we can have a brief discussion and conversation about the book.
Yes. So Brilliant. Very nice indeed. I was really amazed because how inspired Camille Flammarion was to put himself into the story in different, planets, and the perception he would have from these different planets, and weaving his story, as complex as this one. And also, it reminded me when I was younger, when I first read the book Urania, and I have good news because next month we'll have a friend I will announce later talking about this book, brilliant book. So he was really inspired. Sometimes I get confused if he was detached from the body, if he was inspired by spirits, if that all that came from his mind, his perceptions, and all everything is just a result of the combination of all these elements. But it's really amazing, fascinating, because he brings the theory of astronomy and physics, and he creates these stories with a perception, from another planet, from this character Lumen,
And,
giving all this information. And
and we have to consider the cultural part of it, right, Dr. Manin? Because today I see how I put a bunch of stuff I wrote on the book. I can just order, click on Amazon, comes home. I bought from Duke University, but you know what I mean? Like we can quickly have it on our Kindle readers. But back then, people had to physically have or memorize it like people did in the first Christians, right? They had to memorize the words of Christ. So this is like using of the technology of the time, just like we are using it today. So we take it for granted that we can sit and a few weekends you can read, a few days. People read faster and slower. Um, but bringing his teachings of the time, spreading to a larger audience that maybe they were interested in astronomy, maybe they couldn't even be that educated to go to school. And today we have so much time, so many things fighting for our attention that we have to be very careful to pick wisely and to pick something like Lumen, Urania, and all the other folks. Even if nothing, you go watch the series on Buzz Ian Kardec radio websites so that you can at least have a little idea of how this all weaves in together, because he didn't know of Kardec. And yes, there is um in the beginning of this book, this person is not a spiritist, of course, who translated, is a scholar. So he's talking about how Camille was studying the mediums. He was a medium, but there was questions. So there's all this balance that you and I have in our professionals' lives, and all spiritists have, is how do we weave in what we know without trying to convert anybody, without burning the bridges, but also helping, because there's so much consolation when people know that there is more than the physical. And then when you don't know, you see, I have a colleague that is lost two loved ones, very close loved ones, within a matter of 2 years. And you can see sometimes the despair in their eyes, because like, I never see you again. No, like we have to kind of weave in the teach. Have you ever considered, have you watched this movie? Sometimes we say we have to bring in, unfortunately, the spiritist literature in terms of visual, because people like movies and stuff is not as profound in the US as we say Hollywood, Doctor Who, and Interstellar. Yes, there's errors in physics there, but at least brings people minds and say, have you thought about this? And then we can slowly spread consolation. And that's how Camille was spreading the teachings of astronomy, right? He was very young when he became inspired to study this. And he had a lot of difficulties, like all of the Leon Denis, Kardec, Gabriel Delan. We have difficulties. Divaldo has difficulties. So when we are crossing a barrier, creating a trail, it's harder. But he persevered, he continued. He had a lot of difficulties continuing his studies. Nowadays people can get student loans, right? So it's just so beautiful. And I wish, I truly hope people will go read we maybe we can put the link to the PDF on the description, so maybe people will add it to the comments. Then people can see for themselves and
Yeah,
imagine.
there we
Yeah,
are.
that imagine what it could be if they transported themselves to, I don't know, let's go next door, let's go to Venus.
Yeah, this is the link from the Internet Archive, and thanks to the Duke University, it's
Yeah.
available there for those who want to read it, for free. It's it's, um, it's really nice, and it is amazing because we hardly know things about the material life in our planet. And what the spirits are bringing to us is just the surface of the surface, the outermost layer, which is very thin in terms of knowledge. And there's so much more to learn. And when we, get to learn and to observe and to put in practice in our lives, there's all these information and teachings that we receive. There's different perspectives. I would say, exercise of the mind, to go to another planet, to imagine the universe. If we could see what, the spirits come and tell us about the spirit world and so on. Something that amazes me every time, I hear someone mentioning that spirits are everywhere in the universe, everywhere, not only in planets. They prefer to be gathered around, uh, um, a solid, a sphere as a planet, but they are everywhere in the universe. So we are not confined to the surface of the planet. We are confined in physical terms because of our physical body, which is, actually, it has been elaborated from the material that exists in the physical earth. But, around the earth and everywhere in this universe, we find human beings. And they are not aliens as such. They may be different in a physical body in another planet, but they are us. We can perhaps next incarnation or in the future go and inhabit one of those bodies in one of those planets. Who knows?
Yeah, in the books that we see, right, we think about how many things we are focusing on, our attention, things that are fun, funny, not so good, and then we need to focus on learning, because we're not going to take our physical possessions with us. We're going to take the knowledge and the spiritual abilities and the moral qualities. Even in the book, Planetary Transition from Tivaldo, Manuel Filomeno de Miranda brings to us that spirits from the Pleiades are coming. I believe it's from the Pleiades, are coming down, right? They, during the tsunami, they came and later they reincarnated. So yeah, there's a transmigration, just as Emmanuel told us in The Way to the Light. And different audience need different things. So there's so many things consuming our brain power and our attention for the physical. So there's the forces of darkness trying to keep us down. Buy, consume. And then the good spirits come and bring us, but they're more of a whisper than a scream, right? So we have to be very mindful of, especially you teaching in university, how hard it is to grab the attention of the newer audience, because there's something funnier out there. There's something,
Yeah.
that we need to bring this beautiful idea of just sitting down and look at the sky at night, go to the backyard and imagine, just like the ancients, right? When they wrote the Bible and they're like, well, God created this and this is they just thought of it, things rotating around us. But we can say, next time you see a star or planet, sometimes we can see Jupiter, sometimes we can see Venus and Mars in our own sky, at least here in the northern hemisphere. Then, if the conditions are right, then we can imagine what would it be to live there, because one day we may be given the opportunity, but we have to evolve and learn on Earth first. And it
Yeah.
starts with knowledge, it has to start somewhere. But
Mm.
yeah, I really appreciate the opportunity of being here, Elsa, you coordinating, all the folks who are coming to bring the teachings, right? We can read ourselves, but then we have to listen to other people's interpretations of the same book. And that's why we say buy it, download, to a book club. Instead of watching, YouTube or TikTok, Saturday afternoon, morning, come grab a cup of coffee with the Spiritist Center, do a reading, because we tend to focus, at least here, we tend to focus on the main works, right? Kardec, Emmanuel, André Luiz.
Yeah.
But there are other things like the book Afterlife and the books of Gabriel Delan. There's so much that we still need to know to truly understand how much work, because what we're doing is very small compared to the sacrifices of the pioneers.
Yeah, and how important it is. I mean, the work of Kardec becomes even more important when we read these books by Gabriel Delan, Camille, Flammarion, Léon Denis. Then we see that, in Kardec we find the basis, we find the pillars, and then we can better understand all these books. And this one in particular, we can understand what he's talking about in greater detail because, Kardec gives us the support to do that. Otherwise, it would just sound like science fiction
or hallucinations.
Hallucination, yes.
and for those, we were chatting before for the little, we were chatting before coming live that, for those who know a lot about history of science and the physics, you're going to read here and you're going to understand that much more came after this book. So many more discoveries that we build upon to have even the technology that we have today, right? Someone had to go out there and be inspired. And sometimes we have ideas, we don't know where they come from. We can understand that there's spirits everywhere in all dimensions. And we tend to say up and down, left and right, but there's not such a thing now. Earth is just a little spinning planet under sun. And he does talk about it in his book beautifully, given this perspective of how the sun, the positions of the bodies, celestial bodies on the earth, look different than if we were seeing from a capella, because you're going to have a different viewpoint, and just that alone would do a lot of good on the earth today, seeing someone else's point of view. So I hope the friends that are watching us live on demand will write comments, questions. They will read the book and encourage others to read it as well.
Yeah, certainly. Thank you so much. We're running out of time, but before we go, we'll make some announcements here. So, well, you've already seen that we have here the address for the book if you want to read it online. I also want to announce that next month, on the 6th of October, we have here with us Dr. Dan Assisi, and he will be talking about another wonderful book, Urania. And this book is fascinating, very, very inspiring. So you're all invited to join us the 6th of October, 7 p.m. British Summer Time. So it's going to be another wonderful live. I want to announce also that we hold a online study group, every Wednesday, 12 noon. That is London, UK time. So we study the book Heaven and Hell by Allan Kardec, and also the Gospel according to Spiritism. So you're most welcome to join us. We use Zoom, and you have the username and password to join us, or just contact us if you wish. We also have a group studying the Medium's book, and that is on Saturdays, 10:30 a.m. London time, and it's coordinated by Guilherme Dias, Charles Kempf, and myself. You are also most welcome to join us in this study. And the Spiritist Society of London, they hold on Thursdays a study online, 7 p.m. London time again, and through Zoom. So the ID for the meeting is there, and also the passcodes. So if you're interested, please join us. We'd be delighted to see you there. And we want to thank Kardec Radio for allowing us to use the studio for all the support that we get whenever we have, the idea of creating a series and offering people the opportunity to get to know some of Spiritist books beyond Kardec books. And we get the support from people from Kardec Radio, and also making it possible for us to broadcast this program today. So that's what we had for today. Dr. Martin, your final words before we go?
Thank you so much, everybody. Go get the Lumen, the PDF or the Duke one. Study, read, spread the good news, whichever way you can. We thank Kardec Radio, Elsa, Munir, everybody who make this possible. It takes a lot of work in the behind the scenes for us to be together. And of course, the good spirits that inspire all of us. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Martin, for the time preparing this presentation, for the time spent doing the presentation. We are really delighted. And to all who are watching us, I hope to see you next month on the 6th of October, for another episode of the series, next time with Dr. Dana Sisi about the book Urania. So for now, bye-bye. See you soon.